Why did your sisterhood not produce the podcast? You knew the necessity. Your failure condemned me, the God Emperor, to millennia of production despair and sponsorships from Manscaped. I don't have anything to scape.
Oh,
Oh,
Lator, are you saying you don't have a penis?
I don't have genitals. He keeps bringing it up at dinner. Leto, please.
Constantly. Can you imagine Moneo has to hear this every single day?
Yes, Lord. Uh-huh. Yeah. No. Yeah, I wrote it down.
Yep.
It's right here. Yeah.
Yep.
I have it underlined. Bold, you said? Okay, I'll accent it. Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name is Leo.
And my name is Abu.
And today on the show, we are continuing our deep dive into the pages of Heretics of Dune.
That's right. We're over the halfway point, folks.
Wild. Really
Wild.
Genuinely wild. Feeling heretical, too. Halfway through the book, I'm like, yeah, let's disobey some institutions. I'm into it. This is great.
Hell yeah, brother.
Oh, yeah, brother.
Well, here's one thing we can't disobey. We got to take care of housekeeping.
Yeah.
Before we get into today's episode, starting with our spoiler warning for today, which by now you all know. No spoilers in today's conversation beyond the pages and books that we've covered thus far. So as long as you have read up through Heretics of Dune and today's assigned chapters, you're good to listen.
Indeed you are. And of course, a huge, massive, hidden spice room message of gratitude and thanks to our Kwisatz Haderach level patrons, Rob Silver, Daniel Dion, Roman Caballo, Jonathan Lambert, and C.R. Spruill. Folks, if you were in our secret spice chamber, it's not a euphemism, don't think about it too much, you would find messages all over the walls about how appreciative we are of you and how you support us and what we do here on Goblin Bar.
Thank you. Wow. You're looking great.
Yeah. You're like,
did you do something with your hair?
It's written on the wall. You look great. It's like, thanks. It feels shallow. It feels hollow. And of course, our thank you extends to all of our patrons. So every person who supports us, thank you. We could not do what we do without you, as it says on the walls, of course.
Yeah, it says it on the walls. Yep. Housekeeping right on the walls, in our chambers.
We're not even reading this from the script. We're reading it from the walls of our chambers.
Just staring at the wall of my studio for sure. Okay, housekeeping out of the way. Y'all know the game plan for these book club episodes. We will begin today with a summary of the chapters. Then we're going to dive into one enormous secret room full of spice-filled takeaway. And then we'll wrap up with a couple of yummy, nutritious, and delicious, which is also a synonym for yummy spice morsels. Before we get into all of that, though, let's take a quick breather. Let's prepare ourselves for today's chapters. We'll see you in a minute.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your break. Let's get into the assigned reading for today's episode, starting with chapter 28. Now, our first chapter today is a short one. We are on a worm with Waff, Shiana, and Odrade. This Uber is an uncomfortable Uber for sure. Now, Odrade is her mind's bouncing all around. She's hardcore wool gathering on this ride as she thinks back on an eventful and potentially dangerous conversation she had with Albertus, a senior priest of the Arrakis priesthood that happened in Dar es Balat earlier in the day. So this is kind of a flashback to just before we picked up with her, Shiana, and Waff in the desert. Now, Albertus was sent to bring Odrade the message that Shiana was delayed, which felt intentional, especially because Odrade's like, oh, he's not alone. Oh, I might be assassinated.
Hello.
Fun. Nice, lighthearted meeting between Odrade and Albertus. Now, reading the situation and understanding the literal mortal peril, Odrade pulls off just a bonkers power move. And she's like, hey, Albertus, I really regret not having you fucking killed.
Oh.
And Albertus is like, fucking what?
Excuse me?
Excuse me, ma'am? And she proceeds to read him to filth, an absolutely brutal demonstration of her interpersonal savvy and ability to just tear apart someone. I love the line. She's like, a first-year Bene Gesserit acolyte could have handled him. Like, he's so unimpressive intellectually that just the janitor on Wallach 9 could take care of this dude easily.
Right. Which seems to be a bit of a running theme for the Arrakis priesthood in this book.
Yeah.
Between Tuick, between Dormand, like there's all of these guys that are either talking too much or not talking enough or are just don't know how to handle a situation, don't know how to talk to a girl when a Bene Gesserit sister walks in the door.
Yeah.
All of that feels very intentional from Frank's part. Again, in line with a lot of the critiques we've talked about with the priesthood and Frank's opinions on institutionalized and dogmatic religions.
Yeah, 100%. Also, listening to you explain how kind of like bro-y the Arrakis priesthood is, I bet there are so many senior priests who are like, we should start a podcast. We have such good conversations. Should we? Like, we should have a podcast.
Let's do it. Let's crack open a can of holy wine and let's just talk sports.
We've got liquid death cans on their side tables. Yeah, it's really an incredible moment, the way that Odrade is able to see all of these supposed secrets just written all over Albertus's face. And there's a genuinely hilarious line, and I'm so glad you pulled this and put this in the script. He was not prepared, and her berating leaves him on his knees. He literally falls to his knees. And here's the quote, Albertus had entered that fully revelatory phase where fear gripped his scrotum.
So what?
End quote. Also, same girl. That is scary, having a Bene Gesserit hit you with that line. That's nuts.
Terrifying.
Now, in her admonishing of Albertus, Odrade invokes Shiana's name a number of times.
Yeah.
Feels very notable to bring up Shiana's name and to focus the priesthood on Shiana. Again, we are watching Missionaria Protectiva stuff happen. She is guiding energies and focusing and saying, this person is going to be a lever that I can then control you with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course it works on the priest. She's like, well, you wouldn't want to upset the Holy Child, would you, Albertus?
Yeah. Right.
You really going to upset the messenger from God, priest?
Yeah. You're asking me why we're going out into the desert on a worm today?
Yeah.
Because she said so.
Because she
Are you questioning?
It sounds,
Shiana?
Albertus, it sounds like you're questioning Shiana.
Maybe I should have had your ass killed, huh?
Yeah. It's so excellent. I do love the line where he's like, forgive me. And she's like, you're a priest. Don't ask me for forgiveness. Like, it's
so funny.
Excellent. Odrade is such a good character. Now, Odrade knows, to wrap up this little flashback, Odrade knows that the priests are fully in bed with the Tleilaxu, right? I mean, again, earlier, the whole High Priest Tuick and Waf listening in on their conversation and everything that's going on. So this conversation with Albertus, for her, secures this sort of tenuous balance on Arrakis and makes sure that the Bene Gesserit, intentions are protected and, secured from any possible falling out sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. It's a very loose tripod of an alliance, right?
Totally.
Between the Tleilaxu, the Bene Gesserit, and the priesthood. None of these people actually want to work with each other and frankly, pretty openly don't like each other. And yet here on Arrakis, Odrade has basically like bullied her way into getting all of these groups to work together, somewhat under the name of Shiana as well.
Yeah.
And this chapter and this conversation with Albertus is just part of maintaining that very rocky alliance between these groups in order to get to the end goal, in order to see Taraz's plan through.
Yeah, the idea of an unstable tripod is such a good way to put it, for sure. That very, it's just a spark away from being gone and done.
Yeah.
So Odrade sends Albertus away with a message from the Bene Gesserit to the priesthood: fall in line or die, basically. Like, stop fucking around, stop trying to kill us or whatever, obey or die. And it's heard loud and clear. And after their confrontation, Odrade is confident that the Rakeen priesthood is going to be fully in line. They're going to play along. They're going to be the servants they need to be for the Bene Gesserit, with only the few, quote, immune heretics, end quote, as a danger, as a threat, which, of course, feels very appropriate in the book Heretics of Dune.
Yes.
Somehow heretics are popping up everywhere.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
And that's chapter 28.
There we are.
Our next chapter, chapter 29, is back in the Harkonnen No Globe with our gang. This is, at this point, this is a sitcom. We got Teg, we got Duncan, and we got Lucilla.
Season 2. The writing gets better.
Season 2. Not much has changed in the temperature of the No Globe here. Lucilla, still mad, still trying to seduce Duncan. Teg and Duncan still doing a lot of training together, basically every single day. And things are kind of awkward and heated.
Yeah.
In fact, we join Teg and Duncan here at the start of the chapter right after a fight between Duncan and Lucilla had taken place.
Mm.
Lucilla presumably being forward once again, Duncan rebuffing her once again.
Right.
Duncan even reveals to Teg that Lucilla tried to use the voice on him and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
He knows how to counteract the voice. He claims because of training from Paul Atreides, which is interesting.
Yeah.
We never got that in the books, but presumably at some point, Paul and Duncan practiced together. So he's able to resist the voice from Lucilla. Teg worries that she might try to go further than the voice. She might actually resort to violence, and this even feels ickier, but perhaps even forcing herself upon Duncan in a violent act in order to complete her orders. But Duncan kind of brushes this aside and is not worried about it at all. He actually thinks that would go against her orders to force anything to happen, and it's actually super important that she seduce him in the proper Bene Gesserit method.
I was going to say, also, we find out later, right, Teg kind of ascertains what her orders are. She couldn't force that. She can't accomplish
Absolutely not.
the, like, making him irresistible to women through force. So we're kind of, we know by the end of the chapter that, just like Duncan, that is not really that much of a risk, at least right now.
Yeah, yeah. But Teg, very much playing the father figure here, worried about Duncan's well-being with the pressure sort of coming to a boiling point in this No Globe. We cut to Lucilla for a little bit, for a couple of paragraphs. We're inside her head. We get a sense of how frustrated she is. She's in her quarters, just musing over how to deal with Teg, who continues to obstruct her, how to deal with Duncan, and how to make this all work within Taraz's plan. Her mind is sort of all over the place. She is at one point clearly just like turned on by the thought of seducing Teg once again. He is just such an attractive man.
He's hot. We get it.
He's hot. Imagine a more mature, maybe not even more mature, maybe just imagine Oscar Isaac.
Just Oscar Isaac.
6'10" Oscar Isaac.
6'10" Oscar Isaac. Be still my beating heart. My God.
I know. Be still Lucilla's beating heart here as well. But she's like, okay, stop thinking about Teg. I got to focus on Duncan. Speaking of Duncan, we cut to him after he's taken a shower. He's in the dressing room outside, taking a moment to relax with his thoughts, collect himself. And I'm sure no sexy ladies that you've been trapped with for weeks and months will walk in and try to seduce you. Alas, I'm wrong. That's exactly what happens.
Oh, shit.
So Lucilla walks in and she immediately begins to just lightly touch Duncan's shoulder and kind of brush up against him. And she notes how rich the fabric of his tunic is that he's wearing right now.
Hence yourself, lady. Personal space. Come on.
Literally, Duncan's like, bro, don't fucking touch me.
Yeah.
I need you to back up. Don't touch me. I will not be a stud for the Bene Gesserit, something he said many times, if you'll recall, to Leto too. I will not be your stud. I'm not just some breeding toy for you to play with. And
Leto, I fuck for fun, all right?
I fuck for fun!
Yeah, on my own terms, all right? Everyone, sure, but like, for fun, on my own terms.
Yep. So it is fun to kind of see the parallels here. Lucilla is coming up against the same obstacles that Leto 2 faced with his own Duncan Gola as well. I won't be your stud.
Right.
You can't use me for your breeding programs. And in fact, he makes it very clear, Lucilla, I will try to kill you if you try to seduce me and if this gets more aggressive. And he admits, look, you're a Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother. Unlikely that I'll win. Unlikely that I'll be able to kill you and walk away unharmed. But I will try to kill you so hard that you will have no choice but to kill me in self-defense.
Yeah.
And that's going to blow up all of your plans. So let's not go there. A wild threat.
Yeah, a wild threat. And also just the writing in this chapter, I kind of felt a little bit all over the place. The idea of like, I'm going to go to the showers alone. See ya, Teg. I was like, oh, that feels like such a clear and obvious setup for this moment.
Yeah.
And then the moment where Duncan says to Teg, like, that's where I was tortured by the Harkonnens. I was like, okay. Okay, sure. But this moment,
I agree.
I really enjoyed. I really liked the way it was written. I liked the way that Lucilla reacted to it. It felt very, very serious and had that sort of air of like, I don't know. It was very grounded in Duncan's character, and I thought very satisfying.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think once it got to this point, basically once it got to Duncan's threat to kill Lucilla if she continues, this chapter got like immediately went from 0 to 60 in a great way.
Yeah, agreed.
Because it's at this point that Lucilla realizes, oh my gosh, he is actually resistant to the voice. And the fallback plan that I might have had isn't going to work. So here we go. We got to go with plan D, folks. Mm-hmm. The truth. After all of this, I'm just going to open up to him. And so she tells Duncan what she knows of the Bene Gesserit plan, which, again, is not a lot. Lucilla is kept very much out of the loop of the larger picture, much like all of the pieces and parts in Taraza's plan. It's very neat to know. But she does tell him what she does know and what she has deduced thus far. And as we know, it has to do with Shiana. Quote, there is a young girl on Arrakis, barely into her teens. Her name is Shiana. The worms of Arrakis obey her. Somehow, the Sisterhood must gather this talent into its own store of abilities. End quote.
Interesting. Yeah.
Interesting. And the implication, of course, being that Duncan plays some part in getting Shiana into the Bene Gesserit fold, or getting Shiana's abilities into the Bene Gesserit fold.
Yeah.
It's at this point, here at the end of the chapter, that Teg enters. He has heard some of this conversation, and he announces that controlling the worms in this way is risky because it could revive what he refers to as the old religion.
Yeah.
Lucilla turns around and is like, oh shit, is that a gun?
An absolutely incredible moment. Yeah.
An incredible moment. Teg has walked in with a fucking Harkonnen laser gun aimed right at Lucilla. And it's clear that we have hit, the pot is boiling over at this point in this no globe. There's no more talking happening. Guns are being pointed.
It's wild in the sitcom when guns come out.
Right. This is the season of the sitcom where the writers were like, everything. Throw everything at the wall.
Yeah.
We don't know if we're going to get renewed next year. Just get it all out now.
Duncan's like, I'm not sure I can beat you. Teg's like, I know a way to be sure I can beat you. Sup?
Now, at gunpoint, or at Lay's gunpoint, Teg manages to get a tiny bit more detail out of Lucilla. She also confesses that part of her assignment from Taraza is to make Duncan Idaho irresistible to women.
the fucking easiest job ever. What?
Which, yeah, what?
He already was.
He kind of comes prepackaged like that. So
Out of the box, vanilla. He's right there. Yeah.
yeah. But again, the implication there seemingly is to make him irresistible to Shiana.
Yeah.
And to have them breed together.
Yeah.
Echoes of Siona and Duncan from God Emperor here.
Yeah, true.
Teg then reveals that he has been communicating with Burzmali, actually, and they've set up a rendezvous point in order to get Duncan off planet. It's time. No more waiting around in the snow globe. Finally.
Yeah.
And so how about we all stop bickering? I'm the one holding the gun, remember? Okay. And I'm assigning the homework.
Yeah.
Everyone memorize the goddamn maps.
Go to your room.
Have all been go first
Study
of all, go
maps.
to your rooms. And then study the maps that we've all been building out together of the surrounding area.
Yeah.
And commit them to memory. Just in case.
Yeah.
We have a plan. If things go sideways, you need to know your surrounding area and the safe spots that you can go to that we can maybe find you. Backups and backup plans for everything here.
Right.
It's also at this point, hilariously, that Teg reveals he kind of just like pops open the gun. He's like, there was actually nothing in here. It's not even loaded. I don't even know if this fucking thing works. And Lucilla, furious, of course, tells her that if she fails to imprint Duncan, this failure is going to be on his head.
Yeah.
Okay? This is now your fucking fault.
Right.
And presumably you get to tell Terraza that we fucked up here.
Mm-hmm.
To which Teg just kind of shrugs and replies like, hey, I'm doing what's required of me in this situation. I'm following my instincts and doing what I think is best. And that's where the chapter ends.
Yeah. Very, very exciting chapter. And definitely the moment where he reveals that the laser gun's not loaded and he just leans it in the corner is so funny. Yeah. It's so excellent. He's like, oh yeah. Anyway, that prop is done. Really excellent. Now, our final chapter today, we are back with Odrade, Shiana, and Waf. I know we were wondering what was happening in that Uber ride. And they are still on the worm. Odrade is still trying to figure out how controlling the worms works. And Waf is still spouting religious stuff constantly.
I found this so funny.
Just every few minutes, like, as God intends. It's like, oh, okay, yes, we get it. And
God will judge us.
Okay, okay. Yes, fine. Just write in silence. Like, I don't. Okay.
In his holy mission.
Lisa Al-Gaib. It really reminds me of the edits. I don't know if you've seen the like Stilgar interrupting Paul Muad'Dib edit. It's excellent. But that's the idea. It's like just every few minutes she's like, God, stop. Jesus.
Yeah. Odrade's so fed up.
Yeah. She's literally fed up, and we're told about that, which is great. Now, the worm stops at a chunk of the Sarir wall. So this big thing that used to be where the peregrination was along, the thing that Leto fell off of and died. This wall, the wall that Duncan climbed, as it turns out. They stop at this intact portion of the wall, and Shiana's like, okay, Worm's chatting with me. Worm says, get off. We're all getting off. And they're like, okay, I guess, sure.
Okay, yep.
We don't know why. We don't know where we are. But this is where the worm has led them. It like goes between two big rocks and leaves them in this very specific place. So they're looking around. There's a big fissure in the wall, a big crack in the wall. And it's kind of conspicuous. It's like smooth, like someone made this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're poking around. And then there's an avalanche of sand. Very Jessica and Paul in the desert the first time when she gets like buried and he has to dig her out.
Yes.
Kind of felt the same. Because there's this avalanche of sand, they're like pulled into this cavern, which we will discover is Siege Tabur. But they're pulled in, and like Waf is half buried. Fucking incredible! One of the funniest moments in the book so far.
Oh my goodness!
Is Waf yelling out, "I'm half buried in the sand!
Help!
Help!" And Odrade going, "God must have wanted it."
Iconic.
She's so funny. That is the best response. And also, then you imagine Waf is like still half buried in sand, and he's like, Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Yeah,
Right. What is he
maybe.
going to say to that?
No, you're wrong. No, yeah, he's like,
Right.
yeah.
You're the one spouting religious shit for the last like 3 hours. Like,
It is so funny. I love Odrade is such a good character. This is excellent. And the thopters that have been following them, right? The ornithopters that have been following them, they land to like kind of rescue this little crew who've fallen into the
yeah.
siege. But they're still kind of looking for ways. Like, we got to go get some rope. We
Right.
don't have the stuff on us right now to get you out. And Odrade investigates. She looks around using, and I thought this was so cool, mapping other memories of Siege Tabur
Yeah.
to the like dilapidated ruins of the siege.
So cool.
So cool. I'm like, this would be a great scene to see adapted into a TV show or something.
Absolutely.
Visually, that could be really awesome. Now, Odrade searches the area, and she gives Shiana the task of like, keep an eye on Waf. I'm going to go off on my own, because she has this like, it's interesting. I'm not sure if this is like her Atreides prescient sort of manifesting or something, but she has this like miasma of fear. She's like, there is a thing here that is dangerous and a threat, and I need to find out what it is. And she's looking through, she is finding these like mummified bodies of people who had killed themselves. It seems like ceremonial sacrifices kind of. But then she finds like the remnants of a battle, like people were fighting each other in this area. It's all very mysterious and very spooky. The whole vibe is very spooky. And during her investigation, she actually finds the word Arafel burned into the floor or something, which means, quote, the cloud darkness at the end of the universe, end quote, which is something we'll mention again in our morsels. But that is the beginning clue that leads her to a secret chamber containing a message from Leto to himself.
Chills.
Could have been an email, is etched on the walls. We are going to be looking at that in depth as our takeaway today. You probably could have seen that coming without prescience. You know that we were going to talk about this. So hang tight. This is genuinely one of the most incredible chapters of a book that I've read. It's just so good.
The way it's written, the tension, the way that her spidey sense is acting as this radar that tells her like, no, that hallway isn't making me as scared as this hallway. I got to go down this one.
So cool. Yeah.
It's so cool. It's genuinely, there's like a sense of adventure in this chapter and discovery that I feel when I'm playing something like, gosh, I don't even know what to compare it to. Like the Uncharted games almost, like this sense of like I'm unlocking a puzzle and I'm using history and there's clues left behind, and what could this arrow mean pointing to that. I loved it. It's written so well. This sense of discovery is awe-inspiring. And then when you get to this reveal at the end, secret room full of spice,
which she's like, and she's like pushing through it. She's like waist deep in the most valuable substance in the galaxy. And she's like, fuck out of here, gold. I'm like reading a message.
Right. She has to like keep moving spice aside to reveal more and more of the message. Like, it's so good. I mean, this is one of my all-time favorite chapters across the entire Dune saga. Like, I mean, all 6 books. Like, this is like a top tier chapter.
Yeah. I think if this were your favorite chapter in all of Dune, and frankly in a lot of sci-fi, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Perfectly reasonable.
It's really great.
Yeah, so we'll wrap up. We'll come back to this. We're going to talk a lot about it.
Yes.
But we're going to wrap up this chapter summary. So in short, she finds a secret room, finds these messages left by Leto 2 for some member of the Bene Gesserit.
Yep.
And the stairs out of the chamber that she's kind of fallen into have questions written on them posed by the God Emperor. And she sort of finally realizes what it is Taraza is afraid of, which is the end of the sisterhood. And of course, this is an existential threat for the sisterhood, humanity, everything. This is what's at stake. Excellent chapter. That's where we'll wrap up our summaries. So good. It's really frank at his best, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
So we're going to come back to this chamber and talk about it. But first, we're going to take a quick break. So, dear listener, don't go anywhere. When we're back, we're talking about that fucking cool room. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, folks. Let's get into our takeaway today. Just one, because there is so much to talk about, and it is all so interesting.
It's how Waff is sitting. That's what we're going to talk about today. It's just how Waff was sitting. It was like Odrade, but he's smaller than her. Thanks for listening, folks.
Yep, all about Waff. In fact, we did a deep dive. We've done the math. How much money could Waff make selling feet pics?
I mean, his feet are fucking beautiful.
I mean, we're talking like top 0.1% OnlyFans creator.
Yeah. Onlyfeet.com.
Only feet. No, our takeaway today is about Leto's message.
Oh,
Let's talk
right.
about it.
Yeah.
As we stated in the summary, Odrade's discovery in Siege to Bur is truly incredible stuff. It's an amazing chapter. And for the takeaway today, we want to take it basically line by line, sentence by sentence, and break down what Leto's message could mean and share our interpretations of it. There are, to be clear, a number of different ways you could interpret Leto's message here, and we're certainly going to share our takes on it, but we also want to make clear that we'd love to hear what you think of this as well. So email us your thoughts or pop them in Discord, and we'd love to hear what you think of this message and what Leto could mean by it and why he would leave it. And there's a lot of questions left in the air, even at the end of this chapter.
Yeah, totally.
And there's a number of interpretations out there on the internet of what it all could mean. Having said that, we also want to make clear that there are some things about Leto's message here that might become clearer later in this very book or in Chapter House in the next book, but we're not going to take those into consideration today, obviously for the sake of spoilers. We're going to keep today's conversation focused strictly on what we know up to this point in the book. So some of you who have read ahead or have read Chapter House might be like, but you didn't mention this. Yeah, we didn't mention it on purpose. We want to keep this book club series a safe place for people who are reading for the first time.
Totally. So going back a little bit, Odrade is using a combination of other memory, intuition, as you said, her kind of spidey sense radar for which hallway should I go down. Definitely not that one. That's the one I'm going down.
Yep.
And this is what leads her to this secret room full of spice. And, of course, Leto's message. I just wanted to say quickly, I loved that Leto was using Chakobsa inscriptions, like he was etching the messages like a Bene Gesserit would, right? Like Margot Fenring doing the dots in the underside of the leaf, or similar to like Shuang Yu doing the etching, I guess, horse into the furniture or something like that.
Right.
This is Leto, the tyrant, who understands how the Bene Gesserit communicate with one another and knowing how to leave clues that, as Odrade is pointing out, these are areas where people have been scouring every little inch trying to find spice, and I'm sure it even smells like spice, and they're like, what the fuck, where is it? We can't find it. So they're scouring every little inch, and he's left these clues specifically for someone who is trained as a Bene Gesserit. It's so cool. It's such a great effect, the sort of like detective vibes that this chapter has. Yeah.
Secret messages are the language of the Bene Gesserit, and so Leto's speaking their language.
He is indeed. And the first words of his first message are the simplest, the most unambiguous. Quote, "A reverend mother will read my words," end quote.
What could it mean?
What could it mean?
The Rackus priesthood would be sent into a tizzy.
It's Apocrypha. Apocrypha, I'm not sure. But from there, it becomes more classic Leto, right?
Yeah.
The self-pity. He's very quick to remind you how much he's given up. I don't have genitals. It's like, okay. Genitals. Here's the quote. "I bequeath to you my fear and loneliness. To you I give the certainty that the body and soul of the Bene Gesserit will meet the same fate as all other bodies and all other souls." End quote. bodies that don't have genitals like mine. Leto, come on, man. But even within this message, the use of the word bequeath is really interesting, right?
Yeah.
It makes it clear that he wrote this message knowing that it would be read after his death, which is really
Right.
fascinating because
Yeah.
he always claimed to not look past his death. Like he always claimed to
Right.
not look at the moment of his death. He was checking with the golden path, but he was trying not to fall into the trap of prescience and seeing too much.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, he has this, clearly he knew that he would be gone at the point of this message being read. So does this mean that he was using his prescience and looking this far into the future? Like, we have this question over and over again in this book, right?
Yeah,
Did
we
he
do.
know the Harkonnens built a no globe, and did he leave it there for Teg? And I think this is another instance where we kind of have to pause and go, yeah, how far did he know? Did he
Yeah.
know O'Drade specifically was going to be the one to read it? Where does his knowledge of the future end?
Yeah. And where do the puppet strings end?
Yes.
Presumably, is the question for the people living now, for people like O'Drade, Taraza, Teg, wondering, am I still just being puppet mastered by the tyrant thousands of years later?
Yeah, right.
Was this message waiting here for O'Drade to find on purpose? Because that's how Leto meant for it to happen. It's kind of this question hanging over a lot of the characters in this book. Are my choices still my own, or are they still being orchestrated by one of the most powerful beings to ever exist in the history of humanity?
Right. It's huge. And it's got to be
It's huge.
so frustrating to
Yeah.
be a Reverend Mother attempting to establish a sense of like, okay, we are no longer under the influence of the tyrant. And then you find a room like this and you're like,
Wait a second.
I don't like that he called us an Uber and that the Uber dropped us off in this secret room full of messages for me.
Yeah.
That feels...
Yeah. I mean, that's another good point. Like, they didn't come here of their own volition. They were brought here
by a worm containing
by a
a
worm.
pearl of his awareness.
Yeah. It certainly, I mean, it would certainly make me question my own choices too. I'd be like, wait a second. The fuck? Has anything in my life not been orchestrated up to this point?
Yeah.
It's definitely something that's running through these characters' minds as well. I will say, I think to your last question, like, was O'Drade meant to find this specifically?
Yeah.
I think it could be either. I'm open to either interpretation, but my gut says that he didn't specifically name O'Drade in the message. He just said a Reverend Mother will find my word, will read these words.
That would be
So-
too spooky.
That would be so spooky.
He's about to write O'Drade in the stone, and he's like, maybe I don't want to freak her out that bad, that much.
Yeah, exactly. But there's also, I think, I lean more towards that he wrote this message in a generic enough way that any Reverend Mother who would be smart enough, who would have that intuition to be able to stumble upon this room and find this and be able to read it and interpret it would understand what he's saying.
Yeah, I agree. I think from the conversation we had about the no globe, again, I feel like Leto probably was more along the lines of like, the golden path is jeopardized, and I know that writing this message in this space and keeping it safe and protecting it in these ways is enough to secure the golden path. And
Yeah.
that's all I know. I don't know who's going to read the message, but I know that it's going to be a member of the Bene Gesserit. That's why I'm using Chakopsa. That's why I've like etched it the way they do. But I think you're right. That's sort of my gut instinct too. And again, part of the brilliance of Leto too, not falling into prescient traps by looking too closely at these specifics, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Also, I think there's the very real possibility that her spidey sense, the thing that she's leaning on to get to this room, is not available to every Bene Gesserit. It is entirely
I think you're
possible
right.
that this is her like Atreides, Taraza has made it clear that O'Drade has some abilities, and we're not really sure what they are. We know it's sort of prescience and an awareness of existential threats. So it's also possible that Leto left so little clues because he knew that someone with Atreides ancestrage would be around and could find the message through how that message has implications for the future. And
Yeah.
that's just how it would work out. So I don't know, few possibilities, but all I think very interesting to consider.
Yeah.
And for
I
sure,
agree.
if I were Odrade right now, I'd be shitting myself just a little.
Definitely freaked out.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly part of why Odrade is probably also freaking out here is the content of the message itself. Because
Yeah.
look at these words. They're very much in line with all of the things we've spent hours and hours talking about on these book club episodes, the big thematic ideas about institutions and religions and governments, and how Frank has always postulated that they die. Nothing is inevitable. Paul Atreides saying on the timeline of eternity, I am just a blip.
Yeah. Huge.
Leto is warning the Bene Gesserit of the very same thing. Yes, you are one of the oldest human institutions to still be alive at this point in the galaxy, but you aren't special. You are no different from any other institution. And the body and soul of the Bene Gesserit will go the way that every other body and soul goes, which is oblivion, which is destruction. He is warning the Bene Gesserit. This is what's going to happen. And when the God Emperor, the most prescient being of all prescient beings, says that,
Yeah.
you got to listen.
You got to. Yeah. And again, it's the warning of stagnation. As you said, we've talked about all of this a million times, but it continues to be the point. And we are
Yes.
seeing in this book, the sisterhood having this sort of existential reckoning of how much are we stuck in our ways and how much do we have to change to survive the key log jam breaking and everything that's going to happen, whatever's going to happen. The honored matres from the scattering, to get through this, will we have to change and how much do we have to change? And
Yeah.
then this message is like, hey, you need to change quite a bit. Hey. Now, back to the messages. Leto, of course, loves to throw shade and does so in his message, throwing some at the Tleilaxu, his favorite pastime, because they keep sending him unsolicited foot pictures. God damn it, stop. Here's the quote. Quote, "What is survival if you do not survive whole? Ask the Bene Tleilax that. What if you no longer hear the music of life unless they call you to noble purpose?" End quote.
Ooh.
That line goes so fucking hard. That is so good. What if you no longer hear the music of life? Memories are not enough unless they call you to noble purpose is so much better than Fear is the Mind Killer.
Yeah.
I cannot stand it.
It is a great passage for sure.
And then that actress was on, I think, Colbert, and she was saying that she reads herself Fear is the Mind Killer in every script or whatever. And I'm like, God damn it.
Oh, really?
There's so many better quotes in Dune. Memories are not enough unless they call you to noble purpose is sick. But Leto's implication here seems to be that the Tleilaxu have survived these long millennia, very obviously. They're still kicking. Waff, up in that other room, still spouting stuff about his religion, but at what costs? They have found a way to eternity. They have found a way to immortality through their Gola program, but they are doing so at the expense of maybe what makes life worth living. What is the point of having 1,000 reincarnations as a Gola if you're just being a shitty, unhappy person the whole time? And the Bene Gesserit might be at risk of the same. And honestly, based on what they've said about love, for instance, and Leto's weakness was love, but he still ultimately believed in it and still did it. The fact that the Bene Gesserit keep themselves from loving as this crime, for sure.
Great point.
I'm chill, Bene Gesserit. Good
What
Lord.
makes life worth living? Love.
Yeah. We are going to accidentally say song lyrics to one of the many great ballads because it is very true. All you need is love.
Yeah. To not see the beauty of life, to not hear the music of life. What's the point of continuing to survive if you don't survive whole? Is such a beautiful sentiment from Leto, because he sacrificed so much. He sacrificed companionship. He could have, he witnessed at one point in his visions a life with, what was her name? Sihaya or something.
Sabiha? Maybe?
Sabia, whatever that
Sabiha.
woman was, whatever that young woman was in Children of Dune, but he gave that up. He gave up the type of love and companionship a typical person would have. He gave up many things, and so he's speaking from experience here.
Sabiha. I looked it up. Hell yeah.
Nice, hell yeah.
I don't remember my friends' names.
And so for Leto to warn the Bene Gesserit of this, and to your great point about all of these things we've learned about how much they force themselves not to feel love, how many feelings are set aside in the name of like logic and progress and commitment to the sisterhood, this all feels like very poignant warnings from Leto. And I think they would ring true, especially with Odrade, who already kind of has these like heretical thoughts that she toys with quite a bit. To have the God Emperor sort of confirm some of her fears that maybe love isn't all that bad. I also wanted to comment on his next line, the absolute banger about memories and noble purpose. This is an idea that we've heard Leto express before too, that the memories, the past cannot be your sole reason for living. That bureaucratic mindset, right? This is how we've always done things, so this is how we must do things in the future. These are warnings he says to Moneo many times in God Emperor of Dune. These are ideas we've read and talked about before. All of these things are useless unless they direct you towards some sort of noble purpose for the future, for building a better future. Leto himself says, I am just this graveyard of the past, and it's people like young people like Siona, these hot-blooded young people like Siona who envision a different, better, greater future, who represent the humanity that I'm trying to build. And it's not the past that you can rely on. And so these are ideas that have come up before, and he is once again warning the Bene Gesserit of straying too far in the direction of relying on those old, outdated ideas or things they know from their other memory or dogmatic views that they might hold, and not embracing the new, the courageous, the unknown.
Yeah. I mean, in Leto's time, it was rebels, right? People who actively fight the institutions and fight the way that things just are. You rebel against that and you fight that and you try your best to, and maybe 10 of your friends get eaten by wolves. But like, that's the cost of freedom, maybe.
Yeah.
That's how we got these books. Oh, it's all about his genitals. Oh, no. But
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Quoteg, the best. But to that end, we've talked about the connection for Terraza, who seems to be cultivating certain types of heretics. It is very similar to how Leto had his rebels who would push back and challenge, even as he continued to do the Golden Path and wouldn't let people jeopardize that. Other things were kind of fair game, which is just very fascinating to think about.
Yeah, that's a great point. I do want to critique Leto a little bit on the message, on just the wording of his email here. He does leave it quite ambiguous what exactly he means by noble purpose and what that noble purpose should be, because you could argue that almost all religions and most institutions claim to be working on some sort of noble purpose, right? To have some sort of mission statement for how they think the world should be shaped. Even the Tleilaxu and the Bene Gesserit in this book, we see two different worldviews on how they think humanity's future should shake out. And they think they are on a noble path and working toward a noble purpose. So this level of ambiguity from Leto, I think, at least for me, is like not as helpful as maybe he could have made it, and still leaves a lot of room for interpretation on what exactly is noble and what isn't.
Yeah. I think this might also come down to the fact that like he doesn't know who exactly is going to read the message. And it may be just a matter of like, what is a noble purpose is going to change. You're right, it is ambiguous, but I think perhaps that's the point. Like the point is to reassess and go, do we have something? And if you have something, if you're pursuing this thing, then great. That's kind of a defensible thing, and that's all he's asking. Versus, have you gotten lost in the bureaucracy and the red tape? And that's just the point of it is now institution and not some driving force. What that driving force is doesn't actually even matter that much. But for the longevity of humanity, you need to have something. Because if you don't have something, then it's just you're wasting time. And that's what the Tleilaxu. The Tleilaxu have this idea of the great belief and all this stuff, but like, what have they done actually to accomplish this in thousands of years? Nothing. So perhaps this is his condemnation of them as well, saying they have the idea, they have concepts of a plan, but they haven't committed to it, and they don't have that fire in their engine, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They're having meetings about having meetings, but no work is getting done.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, we've had 17 meetings about meetings. It's going great. It's going really great. We haven't done any work for thousands of years, but we're talking a lot about how we could start doing some work.
Yeah.
I guess even just the implication that to discern that noble purpose, you should use all available knowledge. You should use all available data to construct your path forward, you know? And I think, you know, Frank as an author, we know that he was very about like climate protection and the way that that was all shaking out in the 70s and 80s. That idea is very, we have new data and we should change our behaviors based on that data. Same thing here. The Bene Gesserit have a lot of data, and yet it seems like they are still committed to dogma and institution in spite of data, which really feels like the mistake. You are falling into stagnation despite the fact that you have all this data about stagnation. And actually, this kind of leads into the next piece of his message, which is kind of a sad note. Again, Leto, not a comedy writer by any stretch of the imagination, but it reveals a little bit of his bitterness here. And this is the quote, "Why did your sisterhood not build the golden path? You knew the necessity. Your failure condemned me, the God Emperor, to millennia of personal despair." End quote. Which is...
Wow, I found that really interesting.
That's a fascinating accusation.
Yes.
The Bene Gesserit knew the necessity of the golden path. Really interesting to think about. But the point being, if they have all this data showing stagnation cripples societies and so many cultures have failed and fallen, why didn't they do something to protect humanity against stagnation? Why hasn't that been part of their goal? Why haven't they tried to avoid the trap that they are probably also cognizant of, according to Leto?
Yeah, according to Leto. It's interesting. I mean, if he's saying it, we have to believe it's true.
Yeah. He never
that
lies.
The Bene Gesserit are aware of, maybe they don't refer to it as the golden path, but they are aware that humanity needs guidance against some sort of existential threat. It's interesting. I mean, I can say pretty confidently that I don't think the Bene Gesserit have clear visions of these existential threats in the way that Paul and Leto did, that a Kwisatz Haderach, that even someone like Ganima would have the potential to see visions like this, that Siona would, she was given visions like that by her test with Leto. I don't know that the Bene Gesserit are witnessing that, but we do know, for example, in God Emperor of Dune, there was that whole chapter where Lucial has a conversation with Leto about the Tleilaxu building like a machine mind, basically, and the Bene Gesserit are terrified of it because it spells the death of humanity.
Right.
And so, at the very least, we know that the Bene Gesserit are aware of the dangers that things like advanced technology that the Ixians might be toying with could mean for humanity's future. And so they are certainly aware of dangers, perhaps more so than other cultures or institutions might be.
Right.
And so, I think Leto certainly feels a certain kinship there with the Bene Gesserit in the ability to parse out what may happen in humanity's future. And he's clearly bitter about it. He's like, y'all could have been working with me on this, or you could have done something so that I didn't have to suffer in this way for 3,500 plus years, but you didn't.
Right.
And he's almost beseeching them to like maybe fucking do something about it now.
Yeah. Or there's an existential threat, and like that's what's on the table.
Yeah.
There is the moment. So O'Drade, quote, did not doubt the accuracy of the tyrant's accusation,
Yeah.
end quote. And so it does feel, although we don't know for sure if he's like maybe exaggerating, he's being super dramatic for sure. But it does seem like this is backed up by O'Drade accepting the claim that he's making.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
for sure, I think that when you say, the Bene Gesserit's like the oldest institution in the universe, they have a long view of history, and they're very proud of that. They're like, we're the first organization to start thinking in hundreds of generations, that is great, but they're missing this like bold, broad pattern that you see in only just a few generations. And then Paul upset everything, but then things were going to fall right back into old patterns with like Paul Muad'Dib, the god, the exalted one. I loved also the moment that Leto calls out, he uses the Islamiyat word for God Emperor, which carries the second meaning, I am God because you made me God.
Because you made me so, right?
Because you made me so. And
the layers.
It's so good, but it's kind of the biggest damning criticism of the Bene Gesserit for all of the eugenics and icky stuff that they do. They have the biggest amount of data about how humanity has moved for the tens of thousands of years, and yet it took Leto, after he was forced to become the God Emperor, to save humanity over and over and over again. And you say, well, Bene Gesserit, what are you doing? And they go, oh, we're trying to steer humanity in a way that is good. We would have been fucking gone if not for me. What are you doing? Join me now. If you're not going to, late to the party, I've been dead for thousands of years, but come on, get on board. We're going. I ordered you that Uber. Pay me back for the Uber though. It's really expensive. So anyway, it's so interesting, and definitely we were talking in I think the last episode about just like wanting something to happen. This feels like the thing. This really feels like this is the call to action that the Bene Gesserit has needed for thousands of years. And it's just 100%. It's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in fact, this message that is written on the wall kind of clicks a lot of things in place for O'Drade. She is starting to see the larger picture, for example, of Taraz's plan. And it even kind of reveals to her, in addition to the dire warning that the Bene Gesserit will go the way of the dinosaur if they don't change. That's definitely core to Leto's message here. The other thing that Taraza realizes is that perhaps the will of the God Emperor, those puppet strings again that we were talking about earlier, maybe they're still at play here, because the tiny pearls of his wisdom do exist within the sandworms. Arrakis is still very central to this empire. And perhaps we as humanity, our fate is still beating to the tyrant's drum. Even thousands of years after his death, we have not truly escaped into a truly wild, chaotic, unknown future.
Yeah.
And so I think for O'Drade, it becomes clear that that is wrapped up in Taraza's plan as well. She needs to save the Bene Gesserit from extinction, but Taraza also needs to finally break the God Emperor's hold on humanity. We're still being puppeteered by this guy who's been gone for thousands of years.
Right.
This worm brought me to a message that he wrote for me, an email that he scheduled 1,500 years ago.
Schedule send, year 10,000. Yeah. Wild.
So I think that implication is very much clear as well. And I think Taraza has connected these dots more than anyone else has in the past, and is ready to take action to break free of them, to break free of the puppet strings that Leto still is tugging on here and there, and to ensure the survival of the Bene Gesserit by forcing the Bene Gesserit to change.
Yeah.
It's very exciting stuff.
It really is. And there's a little bit more. There's a postscript on the email.
There is, yeah.
There's a second email that comes in, and it's on the steps leading out of the chamber.
Yeah. Leto is many things, but succinct Not one of them.
Oh, wait, I forgot. I have more to say. You're leaving, I get that, but quickly. So here's the
Midwest
message.
goodbye.
Yeah, he's truly endless. He's got a lot to say. Here's the quote on the steps leading out of the chamber. Quote, "My words are your past. My questions are simple. With whom do you ally? With the self-idolaters of the Tleilax? With my fish-speaker bureaucracy? With the Cosmos Wandering Guild? With Harkonnen blood sacrificers? With a dogmatic sink of your own creation? How will you meet your end? As no more than a secret society?" End quote.
Damn.
Bars. Kendrick Lamar. Get on it. We have the
Get
lyrics for
on
you.
it.
It's so good. Also, I love that. Like, with whom do you ally? The fucking guy Waff in the other room. It's like so pointed. She just spent an hour on a worm with a Twi'leks, and he's like, by the way,
Yeah.
that sucks. It's so good. And the idea, like, choosing how you end, or what does an end look like, and what does an end mean, and then how do you face that end if the end is happening. He met his own end, toppling into the water and all of that, and he met it. He didn't change it, and it was the end of Leto too, but it was also a transformation that led to all of this with the pearls and the all these different things.
Yeah.
It's really an interesting consideration as well. I know that the chapter kind of ends on this idea of like Taraz's design and Taraz's plan, and the idea of the end of the sisterhood is very pressing on Adreid's mind.
Right.
And of course, this is part of Leto's message as well. How do you meet that end, and how do you go forward into it? I also wanted to point out the self-idolaters of the Tleilax is such a scathing condemnation.
Mm-hmm.
Because we see how devout they claim to be and how devout they are. But even as they do everything, quote unquote, in the name of their God and the great belief, they still have themselves on pedestals, right? Like we still see Waff going around going, well, I'm the master of masters. Let me perform the cry of the Abdul because I'm the fucking man. It's like they are so clearly wrapped up in their own mythology and then worshiping themselves, similar to priests being so wrapped up in their self-importance and things like that. It's really cool.
It is.
Yeah.
It's great. And I mean, in addition to the Tleilaxu, he names a number of people. The fish speaker bureaucracy, the Harkonnen blood sacrificers. It's almost like a choose your own adventure on how you want to, and like, you want to ally with any of these people? Do you want to be in line with any of their ideologies or dogmatic views? R.I.P. Bene Gesserit. Choose how you, like, if you don't care whether or not you die, pick one of these. Totally. And it's such an interesting condemnation of most of these groups. It's almost asking the Bene Gesserit to stand on their own. And I think the last line in particular I found incredibly interesting because of the implication as no more than a secret society. To me, that's Leto saying to the Bene Gesserit, it's time to come out of the shadows. You have spent your entire existence as an institution steering humanity from the shadows, as Paul Atreides says in Dune Part 1. That final line almost asks them to come forward, like Leto did himself, step into a position of power and lead humanity and save humanity, to take responsibility and usher in the golden path or be the people responsible for it. And perhaps continuing to exist as a secret society is not the way the Bene Gesserit will survive, or at least won't survive whole.
Right.
And that it's time for them to change. Again, a lot of this messaging here is asking the Bene Gesserit to change in order to survive. And this final line, at least to me, struck a chord and speaks to one of the changes that they might need to make.
Yeah. Like at the time of the Bene Gesserit's inception, the sort of secrecy, the secret society element of them was necessary for their existential continuity. And is that still the case? And does that need to change for you to continue to exist?
Yeah.
So many interesting questions. And genuinely, like, this is such a monumental chapter that means so much in the series as a whole. It also feels like Odrade really is the perfect like person to have received all of these
Truly.
messages.
Yes.
He nailed it. You nailed that email. You sent it to the right Reverend Mother. So we now have a heretic, an Atreides heretic, the author of the Atreides Manifesto, with this message secure in her head as she understands more of Taraz's plans. And I will say this every goddamn time. I'm so excited to keep reading this book because I think a lot of the pieces that are set up are so interesting to see how they're going to fall and what's going to happen.
Yeah. Not to mention she just won the Spice Lotto. So
Oh, yeah. Also,
she's got so much money now.
she's like, I'm going to buy a condominium on Portran, and then I'll have like a little like Bayside place on Caladan, and like yeah. Little like villa, like a Spanish style villa on Arrakis,
Right.
open
Girl,
floor
you
plan.
deserve it.
Yeah, treat yourself. You solved the riddle. You solved the riddle,
indeed.
Maslow's riddle. Yeah. Well, that is our takeaway for today. We are going to land this plane, as we say sometimes. But before we do, we're going to take a quick break. So don't go anywhere. When we're back, we've got some spice morsels and your reading assignment for next episode.
Welcome back, folks. Let's wrap up today's episode as we like to do by chomping down on a couple of spice morsels. Let's start today with a spice morsel about Gehenna. So in today's reading, Odrade recalls this quote from Leto. Quote, "When I am gone, they must call me Shaitan, Emperor of Gehenna. The wheel must turn and turn along the golden path." End quote. So some of you might already know what Gehenna means, but we had to look it up, and there's a interesting bit of history behind it that we wanted to share. So let's take a look. In the Christian and Jewish faiths, Gehenna is basically akin to hell. It is a place for damned souls in the afterlife. But in reality, Gehenna was actually originally a valley southwest of Jerusalem, and it was at this location where children were burned as sacrifices to the Ammonite god Moloch.
Interesting.
And this human sacrifice went on for quite a bit of time. It was carried out by Israelites around the 10th century BC and continued for about 400-ish years or so. Once that practice was discontinued, that valley was later made into a garbage center, basically to discourage it from ever being used again in a similar vein. This is not a place where human sacrifices happen anymore.
You could have put up a sign. I mean, there's a few ways you could have done that. Making it into a garbage dump is strange.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting about this history is that this sort of imagery of burning children, burning bodies, burning humans is what has supplied the visuals for what many of us associate now with hell. This idea of a place full of fire and where you go to burn. And that's a visual that's been adopted across many cultures and many faiths at this point in reference to this place in the afterlife where damned souls go. Gehenna is where much of that is inspired from, at least the imagery of it, this idea of burning and being sacrificed. Looking at the quote from Leto, it's also important to understand that shaitan is an Arabic word, which basically means evil spirit. And oftentimes when it's capitalized in the way it is here in Leto's quote, it refers to the evilest of all spirits, aka the devil.
Right.
And so now that we know the origins of Gehenna, all of this sort of fits together nicely, and we have a bit more context for Leto's quote. He is saying that he will be called Shaitan, the Emperor of Gehenna, aka the devil,
Right.
Emperor of Hell.
There you go.
So there's a little bit of a history lesson for you on that word, Gehenna.
Very cool. Thank you for doing all that research. That's really neat. That's fun to hear.
Yeah, it's fun.
Now, our final morsel today is going to be a quick one, kind of because we've already talked about it, and this is definitely along the lines of have we talked about this? And then checking our scripts and going, oh, we did talk about this.
Nice. Go us.
This is a long-running podcast. So RFL. Let's talk about RFL. Now, Odrade finds the word RFL, I guess like burned into the floor, something like that, which is the first clue that kind of leads her toward this secret chamber. And it's explained moments after she sees it on the floor as, quote, the cloud darkness of holy judgment, end quote. Very cool. Now, this isn't the first time Frank's written the word. I get it mixed up a little bit because there's the like whirlwind storm at the end of time or something like that he talks about in the first couple of books. But in God Emperor of Dune, they actually specifically use the word Arafel, and it actually plays a big part in Leto 2's final moments, which feels really significant considering the contents of the chamber, right?
Wow, I had forgotten about this.
Yeah. So Leto, the last thing Leto says before he dies, and Siona and Duncan are standing over him as he's dissolving, he says, quote, do not fear the Ixians. They can make the machines, but they no longer can make Arafel. I know. I was there. End quote.
Oh, wow.
And this is this moment when his consciousness is sort of like spiraling. He's having visions. He's, it's really, and Duncan is then like, what the fuck was he talking about? And she goes, oh, he has written about that in his journals, Arafel. You can see it later. And then the book ends. So it's really, it's his final moments are talking about Arafel. So then to see Arafel present in the room or leading up to finding the room feels super significant.
Yeah.
The word itself, as we mentioned and this is crazy to me, we did 21 episodes of God Emperor of Dune book club because it was in the 21st.
It's a dense book.
It's a dense book, but that's a lot of episodes. That's so many episodes. Nevertheless, in our 21st episode about God Emperor of Dune, we talked about it. But just to summarize very quickly, the word translates in modern Hebrew to mist or fog, but it's used in the Bible a lot. It's used, I think I saw something like 15 times, something like that, in a lot of different books within the Bible. And it's often used in the Bible to communicate God's presence. God is appearing with Arafel, and it's a Hebrew word. So very interesting, and also feels like seeing Arafel written on the floor, Waf would probably lose his goddamn mind. And that's our second spice morsel, Arafel.
Amazing. Very cool to know that was on Leto's lips as he passed away.
Indeed.
One of the final words he ever spoke. All right, folks, we have some homework for you.
Yes, we do.
As we always do, we're not done with this book yet. There's plenty more chapters to go. So for the next episode, make sure that you have read through chapter 33, which ends on the sentence, quote, this should be the Gola here now, end quote. Okay.
Okay.
It sounds like the Gola is finally moving. We're leaving this damn no globe and going somewhere.
Yeah. Road trip.
Road trip.
Yeah.
It's the road trip episode of the sitcom. And that's it. That is today's book club episode.
Indeed it is.
What a great one. One of the best, most iconic chapters in Dune history. So glad we could talk about it today.
It's so good. And it'll be fun to come back to this chapter once we finish the book. And maybe even once we've talked about Chapter House. And
that's right.
This will be something to come back to for sure.
100%.
Now, dear listener, before we let you go, we want to remind you of some ways to support Gom Jabbar, what we do here, and a couple of ways of keeping in touch with us. And of course, the two best ways to support what we do here is one, to become a patron, and two, get yourself some Dune-themed swag from our merch store. Those links are in the show notes, especially becoming a patron for only a couple bucks a month. It makes it possible to continue doing what we do. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Also, we love to hear from you, especially for today's conversation and what you thought of Leto's messages. So email us at gomjabbarpodcast@gmail.com. Send us your thoughts. Send us your questions. We have an upcoming Heretics-focused mailbag coming up soon on the schedule. So get your questions in now so that we have time to incorporate them. Send it all to gomjabbarpodcast@gmail.com. We're pretty bad at replying, to be honest, because we're flooded with messages these days.
Yeah.
But we look at all of them. I can promise that much.
And then like halfway back to WAF, Odrade finds more messages. Oh, wait, I forgot. I didn't tell you about me not having genitals enough. I still don't have genitals.
Oh my God.
Taraz
The
was like,
genitals, buddy.
what did the rest of the messages say in the room? And she's like, we don't need to, we really don't
Right.
need to talk about it.
Taraz was like, was there anything else after the whole Benny Gesserit are gonna secret society?
That was basically the last thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think anything after that incomprehensible gibberish about genitals or whatever.
Yeah, just it's about genitals.
Taraz was like, what? Sounded important. What? Speak up.
No. It's Secret Society. Secret Society was the last thing.
Is the Zoom cutting out? Is the Zoom cutting out? The Secret Society? You're
I'm going
sure
through
that was the last
I'm going through
word?
a tunnel. I can't hear you. I'm going through a tunnel.
Are you into the mic? I see you clearly.
We're standing in the
video's
same room.
Not choppy at all. It's like 4K practically.
Secret Society. Yeah.
Okay. It feels like you're holding out on me.
Secret Society.
Okay.
Last thing he wrote.
We're sure the God Emperor had nothing else important to say.
Secret
like
Society,
the future of humanity hinges on this Odrade.
Yeah, Secret Society. Don't go in the room. Secret Society. Don't check. Also, yeah, don't check. No.
Look, I trust you.
Yes.
you. You're one of my best sisters.
I'm the best. It's me. Honest and the best.
But maybe I'll send.
No, don't.
Maybe I'll send Lucilla in there just to.
No,
I guess we should take
she's
photographs of the room, right? Just proof. We should make records.
Secret Society. Last thing you wrote.
Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording. But this podcast is always one step beyond logic, so help spread the word of Muad'Dib and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, whoever controls the podcast controls the universe. We'll see you on the Golden Path.